everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Book Bites. And I am thrilled today to be joined by Joanne Speirs on Book Bites. How are you, Jo? Nice to see you here.
Hello. You can just call me Jo as well. That's fine. Joanne sounds very formal.
I'm very professional. It's lovely to have you here today. Today we're going to be talking about Tropes and also your fantastic debut novel, Second Chance Love in Point Perry. But before we do that, I'm just going to pop up a cover of the book here. And for anyone who leaves a question or comment, either during the live here today, or if you're watching this back later, you can still go into the draw to win a copy of Jo's book. And we'll leave that competition open until 6 o'clock Saturday night, Sydney time. And I stress Sydney time because, Jo, you're from Adelaide. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Excellent. Now, as I said, we're going to be talking about tropes today, tropes particularly in romance writing. So I was wondering if you could start by telling us what a trope actually is.
Well, a trope is, I suppose, not so much a theme of the book, but it's a point of reference that readers can go to if they're wanting to read about a specific book. So, with my book, I'm obviously talking about second chances, and I've got single dads, but it ranges from anything from, forced proximity, billionaires, revenge stories. It kind of covers all of the little, bits of the story or, subjects or, the vibe, I suppose, is a good way as well of a story that, you can grab, that kind of thing. So that's probably not a very technical way of explaining it, but it's not quite the theme, but it's more a vibe of a story.
I like that, actually, using that as the reference point, the vibe of the story. Just saying hi to Julie. Lovely to have you here today, Julie. So you mentioned a couple of different tropes then. You mentioned false proximity. That's a very popular trope in romance writing. And it's a terminology we use particularly with romance writing, the trope terminology. And it's such an important thing in romance writing that even the RWA conference this year, which is the Romance Writers of Australia conference, the theme for their conference this year is trope actually.
I know. It's going to be so amazing. I have a whole conference kind of revolving around all of these wonderful tropes that we can get to use in our books as well. And I suppose it'll be great to kind of really bring tropes to the forefront of readers as well that are, coming along to signings or that are perhaps, looking to find out what is, the Romance Writers of Australia is all about. So, yeah, it's going to be a really exciting time. And it's in Adelaide this year as well. So it's on my front doorstep, which is going to be amazing to have all the romance writers hit my town.
It's interesting. At this year's conference, last year's conference, we're in the new year already, Sandy. It's March. We're in the new year. Last year's conference was in Sydney, and I went to the cocktail party that night, and that's where everybody dresses up in the theme of it. And there was some fabulous costumes last year, and the theme was glitter, I think it was.
Yes, I think last year was all the glitters. So. And it is every year that I've been to conference, I think I've been to 4 or 5 now. I'm absolutely blown away on that cocktail night with some of the, the costumes that people dress up in. I'm not much of a costume dresser-upper, so I'm very low-key if I dress up at all. But some people just go all out with just the most amazing costumes, or they put a spin on it. They put a spin on, what the theme is. It's just it's a really great night, and I suppose it's good to see that obviously we're very creative people as authors, and some of us are obviously creative in our costume designs as well. Me, not so much.
No, I wore a sparkly necklace. That was the extent of my costume.
I had sequin pants on that I think I bought at the op shop or something, and I wore them for that one night. And Anita Heiss, another amazing romance author, she absolutely loved my sequin pants. So I actually gifted them to her the next day. I'm like, you can actually have my sequin pants because I'll never wear them again because I'm just not a blingy person. And she was just wrapped it. She's got this pair of sequin pants she's gonna wear.
I can't wait to see what some of the people do this year with their spin on tropes, and particularly if anyone turns up as a cinnamon bun. I believe that's a trope in
Yes.
romance writing, which I only learned recently.
Yeah, that's a relatively new trope that's come on the scene, because I'd only really kind of picked up on it last year. So, Cinnamon Bun is normally the male character, and he's soft around the edges and he's sweet, and that's the kind of guy that he is as well. So that's kind of where that whole cinnamon bun trope comes from.
Yeah, hopefully someone will dress as a cinnamon bun. But speaking of these tropes in particular, in the romance world, why is it that tropes are so important in romance writing, and why have they endured since the beginning of romance writing? Because they're a very strong element.
Yeah. Well, they're definitely important because, as authors, it gives us something to, for me, it gave me something to always refer back to, and it becomes almost, a promise to your readers as well. You kind of, once you start marketing your book, you're marketing it with what the tropes are, because that's the readers that you want to actually read your book as well. And once you kind of sit on that, I know for me, I've kind of got a few different tropes in Second Chance Love, and it was, for me, just to keep coming back to those, as well as, okay, this is how I'm going to market the book. This is my promise to the readers, is they're going to get a story about, a second chance and a single dad in a small town. And I think they've just endured because, no matter what romance book you pick up, tropes can sit across any of them as well, no matter what genre it is, whether it's historical, whether it's science fiction, whether it's reverse harem. Even though we might all use the same trope in our book, it's that the stories become so different because of the characters and the setting and the author voice as well. So, yes, you can kind of say, I love second chance romances, and you can read 5 of them, but they'll be totally different stories because they'll be, different characters, different themes, and all those kind of things as well. So I think that's really why they've endured the length of time as well. And, romance has been, written for, hundreds of years, so to speak. So, and they've come right from, back in the old ages as well, when, they were writing about, kings and queens and royalty and those kind of things, arranged marriages. So even like going way back in history, the tropes were there as, in real life, and then obviously as they then became out on the page as well.
Yeah, very interesting point. I just want to say hello to Bev. Hi, Bev. Thanks for joining us today. And Maxine is here also. Hi, Maxine. Lovely to see you here today. Now, obviously, in Second Chance Love in Point Perry, we have a couple of tropes. But one of the strongest ones that came home from me, came home. There you go, giving it away. That was for me as I was reading it, was that trope of returning home. And this comes from Erin, our female lead in the story, and her part of her journey is this coming home story. But what was interesting about her coming home story was that home for her, so she's living in Adelaide at the moment, she comes back to Point Perry where she grew up, not an awful lot of very good memories for her. That wasn't why she came home, right? It wasn't to relive that, joyous youth and that sense of love and warm fuzziness that she felt. There was some, other reasons that brought her home, and we won't do any spoilers. So even in her situation where home isn't that pool of nostalgia and happiness, what is it, do you think, about returning home that is appealing for people to read about?
Yeah, well, I think, because I grew up in the country as well, and sometimes I often think, I suppose I ask myself that what if question, what if I went back home, how would it be, and what would it be like? Would I recognise people? Would the town be the same? Would the community be the same? And that kind of thing. So, I think we can all put ourselves in that situation of, returning back to, our childhood place of where we grew up, if it is different from where we are now as well. And I suppose sometimes, if you do have those, happier memories or it's a calmer place or whatever, you kind of, sometimes you kind of are yearning to go home or to come home and actually try to, find that peace as well. And, I think that was kind of, Erin's, initial thinking was that, spur of the moment when she was having such a rough time in Adelaide, and she kind of thought, perhaps I just need to go back home where, I know there's going to be a sea breeze, I know there's going to be sunshine, and I can just kind of, chill out and try to get my life back together. So, And I think with, a lot of romance stories that the coming home then leads itself to a lot of other tropes as well. And, that you can kind of spin off from that as well. And coming home doesn't necessarily need to be a small town. It can be, coming back to the city. You can be living in the country and going back to the city. And I think it's just, you can really look at how the character reacts to that whole, change of scenery, so to speak, as well, and how they deal with going from one to the other, and, how they go from dealing with, reconnecting with perhaps old people, meeting new people. So there's so many different, internal and external conflicts that we can kind of throw at the characters as well when they return home, and things that we can really get them to think about and to feel about as well of returning home, and what comes with that big journey as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the word conflict, because as you were talking, I was thinking about Erin and even myself. If I went home to my hometown, I was not raised in Sydney. So many different areas where you can hit on those points of conflict, whether it's happy or sad that you're returning, how long it's been, all of those things.
Yeah, and that's kind of what because I tend to write really emotional stories, so I was able to kind of really dig deep, I suppose, for Erin, and she has, there were obviously some things that had happened in her past that came to light once she returned home, so it wasn't all obviously smooth sailing her going home, but her family were quite well known as well, so she had a lot of, those things to deal with as well, because all of a sudden, people, she was going back and there were people that she didn't know, but people who then knew her mum and dad as well. So there was kind of that whole generational change, because it had been, 20 odd years since she'd been back. So there was those kind of conflicts as well that, I could really, really look at, and I always kind of put myself in her shoes and kind of thought, if I went back to my hometown, and how would I feel about, seeing that, or coming across that person, or talking to this person, or those kind of things as well.
Yeah, and I was thinking about Tom as well. Now, Tom is our male lead in the story. And I mean, seriously, could you have crafted a better man? Like, he is a footy player, and a very good one at that. A doting single dad. He's hot. Yeah. And he's a teacher. Like, hello.
And he can sing and play the piano and play the guitar.
And tick all of my boxes. He's gorgeous.
Yes. I did rather fall in love with him.
Which I think is important for us to do, is to fall in love with the people that we want our readers to fall in love with. But his trope, shall we say, is the second chances part, which both of them do have that in there, but it was very strong with Tom, and it's a very popular trope as well in romance writing. What is it that appeals to you about second chances?
Yeah, well, I suppose, and with my book as well, I kind of put a bit of a spin on the second chance. Normally the second chance trope is when they've actually met previously before, have had a rough breakup and have come back together. And I suppose I really wanted to explore the whole, second chances when you've actually been through some big life events and you find yourself suddenly alone. So whether it's, your marriage is broken down, you've had a divorce, loved ones have passed away, et cetera, et cetera. And then how that second chance of coming together when you've kind of got that past life, and the whole notion around what other people would think, how do you feel when you're still kind of connected to the person before, and obviously in Tom's case, he's a single dad as well. So I really wanted to tap into how a second chance with, a cheeky 5-year-old boy would work for him. So, and I'm just a big romantic at heart, and second chances to me, I suppose that was I just wanted these two characters who'd had such a rough trot in their previous marriages to just really find love at the end. And I suppose I really wanted to look at how, love can heal a lot of wounds as well, love and finding the right community, around to kind of help you support that through as well. So I don't know, I'm just a big fan of the second chance trope. That's why. I chose it.
You're definitely not alone. Kate's joined us. Hi, Kate. She loves second chance romances. And I'm thinking that's what Julie Bennett's Me Too is related to. Julie's also left a couple of other comments, which I'm just going to pop up on the screen now. Julie said, reader expectation is a big one. This is going back to, why do tropes endure? Readers want to have their expectations met, which is the promise of the trope. That's so true. And I think particularly in the genre of romance, and I do read a fair bit of romance, and for me, it's the comfort that you find when reading romance. And so if you know what you're going to get, that is that comforting part of it, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, a lot of readers, the same as I'm a mood reader. So I can kind of go, I'm really feeling like a second chance, heartwarming kind of story, and I know where to go. Or I can kind of go, oh, I'm feeling something I want something a little bit more gritty. So let's go, a dark romance with a billionaire or a buyer key or, a Dungeons and Dragons or something else. So I think, a lot of readers tend to be mood readers as well, and the tropes really allow them to, pick and choose where they want to go to look at, what story to read next as well.
And I think that's regardless of what you read. We are mood readers at the end of the day, which is why sometimes we'll pick up a book no matter what it is, and it's just not right for you at that time, and you put it down. But then 6 months later, you pick it up, and it's the best book you've ever read, right?
Well, absolutely. And I read across a lot of genres as well. Like I love nothing more than picking up a gritty crime novel or a whodunit, like a James Harper or a Danica McKenzie or someone like that, like a real kind of whodunit. And then but once I've done that, I'm kind of like, well, something a little bit lighter now, and I'll pick up, an Amy Andrews or something like that, just something that's, really easy to read, and, I can get all the feels and those kind of things as well.
Yeah. Julie's also left another comment about the coming home trope, and that she left her hometown as a child, which I think a lot of us do, and went back as an adult, and a distant relative recognised Julie on the street, but she didn't recognise them. Julie, how rude.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because I went back to my hometown in December last year and did like a bit of a library talk and that kind of thing. And I found it like I was kind of experiencing all those emotions that Erin was feeling, because there was kind of a whole generation of people that I could remember because they were friends with my mum and dad, but they were obviously all a little bit older. And then there's that whole generation of their kids and their kids that I just had no idea who they were. So it was just really interesting walking around and different people who recognise you and who don't recognise you and recognise, they knew my dad because my dad came with me, and it was just, really interesting and just having all those feels of going home and seeing how some things have changed so much, but some things are actually still exactly the same, all those years later as well.
That actually leads really nicely into my next question, which is you grew up on a farm in the country, but you now live in Adelaide. Mm-hmm. Is there a returning home story in your future, perhaps, like proper returning home?
No, not initially, no. No, we're pretty much set here in Adelaide now. So I've got a couple of older boys, my youngest one's in year 12. So we'll be here for a while, but I'm definitely looking at, down the track in my retirement years, retiring somewhere near the beach, because that's where I love to be. So I don't think I'll be returning home, because that's, Point Perry, or the small town that I've based Point Perry on, is about 7-8 hours drive from Adelaide. So it's a bit of a hike to get there, but, who knows? Who knows what the future's going to hold.
So is Point Perry a real place, or is it fictional?
It's a fictional town, but I've based it on a small coastal town called Venus Bay, which is on the west coast of Eyre Peninsula, which kind of sits on a point, and out you've got the back beach, which is the ocean, and then you come through the entrance, and then you have the bay, which is like a really smooth bay. It's very sheltered. But the population of Venus Bay isn't that high. It swells at Christmas time, which is when all the tourists come. And I needed a town that had a hospital and a school and a retirement village and shops and a pub. So I actually matched it with a little town where I grew up, which is called Woodnall, which is in the middle of the Eyre Peninsula, because I obviously knew that town. So I've kind of mashed two of them together, put them on the coast, and I've called it Point Perry. I'm not quite sure even where I came up with Point Perry, but that's just that's just how it stuck. So yes, I've created like this lovely little community in Point Perry that kind of ticks off all those things that, you know, small towns have. You know, it has, you know, Gossiping Greta, and it has, you know, the quirky locals, and, you know, the interesting characters who, you know, run the council and the school, you know, parents committee, all those little things that you would expect to find, you know, kind of in those rural communities as well.
Yeah, and people who know me know that I'm a sucker for small towns. So you're ticking all of my boxes here.
Now,
good. Jo, as a reader, I want to ask you, because obviously as authors we always read a lot, and we tend to read quite widely. Do you have a favourite trope to read?
Yeah, I think for me, I love the kind of rural, anything that's set in a, you know, when it comes to tropes, I could pretty much deal with any trope, so long as it's kind of, for me, you know, got maybe a rural vibe, a country vibe. They're the ones that I'll pick up first. And, you know, even if it's, you know, written in America, you know, they have some great small town stories set in America or country feels. I think of those, you know, they're just close to my heart, and I just really love those. And I do quite like, you know, the Grumpy to Sunshine, which is quite a relatively new trope as well, and forced proximity. Those ones where, you know, you really get to see how the characters can evolve through, you know, the conflict that being thrown in by being in, you know, forced proximity, or you know, the Grumpy versus Sunshine, when you've got opposites attract kind of thing as well. So, but, you know, there's really no trope I wouldn't read, and I can't say, you know, I know I'm babbling here, but I just really love anything at all. So long as it's, you know, so long as it's got a, you know, a good storyline, I'm there.
Bev says that rural romances are definitely her favourites, especially Australian, and we do it so well here in Australia. Fabulous.
And before I started writing, they were my go-to reads. You know, I would read the Tricia Stringers and the Rachel Johns, and you know, those kind of stories set in Australia, set rural, because I could just relate to, you know, the issues that were going on in the towns and the communities, and relate to the people and those kind of things. So they had absolutely, you know, were my go-to stories before I started writing. And I suppose once I started writing, my whole world kind of opened up a little bit, and particularly with my editing as well. You know, I edit lots of other genres now as well, so my eyes have kind of really opened up to, you know, reading, you know, other types of books as well.
I'm going to touch on your editing in just a moment, actually. Maxine's left a comment that second chance romance is good, and thank you, Maxine, for saying that I do it well. My next one, actually, even though I don't write romance as such, there is definitely a second chance thread running through it.
Yes.
You're right, you know, we do use these in all other genres.
Yeah. Absolutely. And even like, you know, things like, you know, some of your crime books and that sort of thing, if they've got like a character who is the same character in 3 or 4 books, they'll often have that second chance kind of romance, you know, just bubbling along behind the scenes, because, you know, they might go back, or they might reconnect after years apart or something like that. So it's actually quite a popular trope even outside of the romance genre as well, even though a lot of those wouldn't say that they write, you know, the second chance romance trope, but it's obviously there as a, you know, a subplot, or a, you know, a small plot line as well.
Because at the end of the day, don't we all want that? If for whatever reason that first love that you've had is no longer there, and there could be any number of reasons for that, we live in hope that we still find that connection with someone, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, you know, that was kind of the question that I asked myself when I first, you know, this story kind of started, you know, germinating in my head. I was kind of like, well, you know, what if this happened to me? And because I started writing this after my mum passed away. So obviously, you know, I was kind of seeing how my dad was, you know, dealing with some of this kind of stuff as well. And I kind of thought, well, you know, what if it happened to me? Would I want to kind of find another love? And how would I go about doing that? And how would I feel about that? And that's kind of where this kind of the seed of this story started, because I really just wanted to explore that whole, you know, the second chance once something's, you know, something big has happened in your life, and all of a sudden you're alone, or alone or lonely, I suppose, as well.
And as Julie says, every good book, regardless of genre, deserves a good romance.
Absolutely.
I would agree with that. Now, we've touched on tropes that you like to read.
Yeah.
As a writer, obviously there's, a few tropes in this one that we've already covered. But is there a trope that you haven't dabbled in yet that one day maybe you'd really like to give a crack at?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because Second Chance Love is my first book. So I'm writing a couple of other book 2 in the Point Perry series I'm working on at the moment, which is going to have a bit of a forced proximity trope in it, which I'm kind of enjoying exploring that, which is something that I haven't really written much before. And I've got a little Christmas story coming out in July, which I've explored some tropes of, the grumpy versus sunshine kind of trope as well. So, I've kind of got a few that I'd like to try out and over the next few stories. So you'll just have to wait and see what I come up with.
They are actually 2 of my favourites to read.
Yeah.
The books, Forced Proximity and The Grumpy Sunshine. So if you put a grumpy and sunshine in a forced proximity setting, I'm in. And if you make the hero a cinnamon bun, I'm gone. I'm in all in for that one.
All right, I'll write that down so I can tickle the boxes for you, Sandy.
Thanks, Jo. You recently, I mean it was this weekend, I think, won the Australian Romance Readers Association favourite debut for Second Chance Love in Point Perry. How fabulous is that?
It was just, it was amazing. And I think I'm still in shock. It's one of those moments where you don't think you're ever in, every chance to actually win anything. And when the runner-up was called out, I thought, oh, that's it. Lucy is amazing. I'm not any better. I'm not as good as her or whatever. So, and there were just some amazing other debut authors in the list as well. So, but no, it was just a thrill, and I was actually in Brisbane as well, so I could accept the award, which was great. And like I was saying to you before, Sandy, as well, it's really great because with the Australian Romance Readers Association, this award was actually voted for by the readers of that association. So it was just a really great acknowledgement, I suppose, for, the hard work that you put in, and this book took me 7 years to write. So, and just to know that, I've actually got a book that is really resonating with the readers as well, which is ultimately what we all want. We want people to read our books as well. So, but no, it was just a great honour, and I was just rapt.
Yeah, no, I was so thrilled for you. Jo and I have we actually met in person, Jo? Did we meet in WA?
That cocktail party that we were talking about before. Yeah.
I've done this before where I've gone up to somebody, oh my God, it's so nice to meet you. And they said we met last year. And I'm like, because we spend so much life online, I always forget who I have and haven't met in person. Yeah. We've known each other online for quite a while now, and we do see each other often on a Friday morning in a writers group. So I was just so excited for you to see that come through over the weekend. It was fabulous. And Bev says congratulations as well. Thank you so much, Bev. Bev's one of our gorgeous regulars here on Book Bites. Now, you mentioned as we were chatting there at one point that you are also an editor.
Yep.
And I wanted to ask you, how does being an editor help or hinder your work?
It hinders because it gets in the way of my writing, but it helps because it pays the bills. So it's a bit of a juggle when you're juggling, because I'm going into my 5th year with my editing business as well. And obviously my book came out last year and I'm working on the 2nd book. So, I mean, it makes it a little bit easier in that, I kind of know now, what the structures should be, and, my rough drafts aren't as rough as what they used to be. I can tend to write pretty clean now because I kind of know where things need to be and what needs to happen. But in saying that as well, my work goes to an editor because I'm too close to the work and I can't actually see a lot of stuff either. So I need someone to have that fresh eyes on it. So, that's been really helpful. And I know that I actually let Second Chance Love sit for about 3 years while I got my editing business up and running. Then I went back to it with fresh eyes with all my editing experience, and I was able to really polish it up with the help of some beta reader feedback as well, and submit it. And so, I kind of know that, it's a process that needs to happen as well. But like I said, it's just a juggle for me to flip between the editing is using like one part of my brain, and then I've got to like kind of turn that off and go into writing mode as well. So it's it's a juggle, but that's my life, and I just integrate it and into what else I'm doing. And on the weekends, if I sometimes write, I sometimes edit. It just depends on what's happening. And but definitely, it's given me a lot more confidence in my work, because I kind of know those key things that are needed, and how to kind of do some basic line and copy editing on my own work when I'm so close to it as well. So there's the pros and cons.
I guess it's the same as being a writer. I'm not an editor at all. But the writer, it's hard to switch the writing brain off when you're reading for pleasure.
Yes.
It would be the same sort of thing, I imagine.
Yeah, and that's kind of why this year I'm tending to not do as much editing. I'm going to do mostly proofreading, because then it's actually easy for me to switch my brain off from proofreading. It's not as taxing on my brain, whereas when I edit, I deep dive into a client's manuscript, and I really, look at the nitty gritty, and I, fully immerse myself in that story for, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, for however long I've got it as well. So, and then it's really hard to come out of that, on a Friday night and then switch my brain into writing mode on the weekend as well. So, so it just means that, the editing is, changing a little bit for me, but it just means that I'm getting more writing time as well, which ultimately is what I want to do. I just want to be able to find that happy balance.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to pop up the details of where you can find Jo online, and I'm going to ask 1 or 2 more questions. So if you've got any questions that you would like to ask Jo, pop them into the chat now. You mentioned books 2 and 3. I think you said both of them were going to be in Point Perry. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I've actually got 4 standalone full-size books that I'm planning on having, all set in Point Perry. So they'll all be standalones, but all with, those same little secondary characters all float through all of the books and that kind of thing as well. So I'm working on book 2 at the moment. But on the side of that, I'm also just working on some smaller short stories and novellas, also set in Point Perry as well, just to kind of complement the bigger ones, and just for my readers to have in between the bigger books, which might take a little bit longer to come out. So, so I've got a Christmas one coming out in July, and then I'm in an anthology with some other romance writers, a Christmas anthology, which I think is coming out in October. So, which is set in America. So it will actually be Hannah's story. So Hannah obviously is my Hollywood heroine. Well, she's not really a heroine. She's my Hollywood star that comes back and gives Tom a little bit of grief. So obviously she has gone back to America in the story, and but she'll actually get her happy ending, I suppose, in this particular anthology as well. So so I'm looking forward to getting stuck into those.
And we might see a different side of her, perhaps.
Yeah, and that's what I'm hoping, because we kind of got a little bit of a glimpse of a different side of her, obviously, at the end of the story. So I'm really looking forward to, seeing where she goes, and how she, in 5,000 or 6,000 words, somehow give her a happy ending as well. So that'll be interesting. I find it hard to kind of keep the word count down, so it'll be interesting to see. Hopefully I can make her happy in those small amounts of words.
That's fabulous, and I'm a sucker for a good Christmas story. So
it was meant to come out Christmas just gone, but life got in the way. So I thought, there's Christmas in July coming up, so that seems to be that'll be a good time to have a Christmas story come out. So,
well, I actually watched a Christmas Hallmark movie just the other day, so I'll take Christmas any time of the year.
Yeah, I love the Hallmark stories. Once again, when you're really in a mood for something kind of cheesy and easy to watch, they're always my go-tos as well.
Yeah, and again, it's that feel good. Sometimes you just need to feel good about things.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me today on Book Bites, Jo. It's been an absolute pleasure. And for anyone who is watching this back later, if you do have any questions or comments for Jo, do pop them in there, and I can let Jo know that they're in there over the course of the weekend, and we can pop in and answer them for you. Good luck with writing the next one. Any indication of when it might come out?
No. Next year. No, well, I'm hoping to have the draft ready kind of later this year, and I'll be submitting it back to Harlequin to see if they will pick it up. because that's who published my first book as well. So it's just a bit of a waiting game, and that's kind of why in the meantime I've got some of these shorter stories that I'm actually going to just be self-publishing myself, just to keep readers, in Point Perry and get them ready for the next big one that comes out. So hopefully next year, one way or another, it'll be out.
Excellent. Well, it's a great town to be stuck in, so we will look forward to that. And Bev says, thank you very much, and she's looking forward to reading your books. Thanks for joining us, Bev.
Yeah.
There will be no book bites next week, just for those of you who are regulars, as I have got an event on talking about my own books. And then I think the week after that might be Easter, is it?
Yeah. Yep. Last weekend of March. That's crazy.
I know. Seriously, I'm not okay with this, but I will see you again soon on Book Bites. Thank you again, Jo, and Julie is wishing everybody a great weekend and good luck with the book. Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Julie.
See you all soon.